All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining the renewal uh, budget workshop. This year we will be walking through the budget modification template and how it can be used for the 2026 program year. We are obviously recording this session, so please be mindful of that. And before we get fully started into the workshop, I do want to introduce the newest financial grant manager to the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship team, Robin. So if you would like to come on camera and introduce yourself to everyone, that would be fantastic.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to join the team and help Dan through this process. So looking forward to meeting a lot of you over a period of the course of the next couple months.
Thank you. Yeah, no, believe me, Robin, I'm more excited than you are. Um, so we've obviously been shorthanded, but Robin brings a lot of experience and great insight. So we're going to be working together on improving all of the processes for everyone and getting things really off to the right foot. So
I should tell everybody I am located in Springfield, and Dan is obviously located up in the Chicago office. So we communicate a lot in this fashion. So it's hopefully the way we'll spend a lot of our time talking to one another as well.
absolutely great. Well, thank you. So um, we want to just let everyone know that kind of the basis for this meeting, and that is that the budget templates are not they're not created by our office. They're not managed by the Office of Illinois Works. These are templates that are kind of required for us to use and for us to share with the grantees. And from time to time, they will change the templates on us. Now, we had been operating under an exemption a couple of years ago and using basically a modification of the modification template, and we're no longer able to do that. So we're using the same standard template that all of the agencies are using. I should say all the bureaus are using. So we want to make sure that everyone is aware of how to use it, and really, make sure that we're identifying any changes to the format, um, making sure that everyone has the same set of guidelines. We're going to provide instruction on how to present the previous year's budget onto the modification template that you're going to be using for program year 2026, and along the way provide some best practice information, uh, not only for this budgeting process, but really for the expensing and the reporting process that grantees go through. We're trying to, as we go through this, I'm sure all of you have heard many times before that uh, that the Office of Illinois Works had outsourced essentially the financial grant management, and we still, to some extent, are. But as we bring that all in house, we want to standardize things for our grantees and make that a little bit easier. So you're encouraged to pull up your budget. I would say to pull up your currently approved budget. I don't think anyone has had a modification, so this would be through the last grant agreement, the budget that was approved. Have that open, and then this modification template open, and you can update it in real time if you would like to. So we request that any changes, if it turns out that you had guessed everything correctly and your budget modification that you had submitted with your renewal documents don't need to be updated or corrected in any way, that's great. Send us an email letting us know. Otherwise, please send an updated budget modification template to me. And either way, those responses are due by end of day on Wednesday, the 19th. If anyone has any questions about that or challenges and needs another day or whatever, obviously reach out to me and let me know. The first thing I will say that though is if you're asking for more time, let me know when you'd be available. Because otherwise it just creates a more back and forth, right? But if you need another day, let me know that. If you need another week, let me know that. If you need another month, let me know that. So, not saying that all those things can be accommodated. I'm just saying, just let me know what your timeline is. All right. So, any questions about that before we get kick off into this meeting?
Yeah, hi, I have a question.
All right.
Hi, Mark
Who is
Williams,
this?
Hire 3.
Oh, hi.
Hi, Mark Williams, Hire 360. We submitted our budget with the template provided for our renewal application. So I think we did it right. We haven't heard anything yet. Is the ball still in your court?
No, this is putting the ball. This meeting is to put the ball back into your court for you to see how we unfortunately we're not able to do a budget workshop prior to grantees submitting those renewal budgets to us. So this is going to provide some updates. And like I said, if it turns out that everything you did is what we're requesting, then you would just send me an email saying, there are no modifications to the budget that we submitted. If, however, during this meeting we highlight or introduce something to you that that you need to change on the budget you submitted, then you'll do so.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. Thank you. All right. So if I could have everyone go ahead and open the chat. Introduce yourself. Just put your name, your role, your agency that you're with. Oh, it looks like I didn't update that slide well enough, but this is the 2025 budget workshop negotiation for the 2026 grant year. But go ahead and place that into the chat, and I'll try to open my chat here. There we go. Finally opened for me, so I can welcome everyone in. So I see Hannah had already said hello to everybody from Metropolitan Family Services. Good morning, Hannah. Good morning, Charlotte with EDDR. Mike Conley with Southwestern Illinois College SWIC. Good to see you as always. Good morning, Kara. I know we said hello when you first came on. Carrie with Associated Builders and Contractors, welcome. Good to have you here. Andre with Lumity, good to see you again. Alejandro with the Lewis University, several of our grants. Appreciate having you on here. Brian Johnson with Metropolitan Family Services, thank you for joining. We have Daniel with Hasia, thank you. Good to see you again. Latricia with Chicagoland Prison Outreach, thank you. Teresa with Hire 360. Good to have you here. Jasmine with Center of Innovation. Good morning, Jasmine. Dawn with Girls Light Our Way, Glow. Good to have you, Dawn. We have Ruth Ann with YBLC. Welcome. Alexander with SWIC. Welcome. Lita with Center of Innovation. Thanks for joining. Renee with Chicago Women in Trades. Good morning. Merrick with Metropolitan Family Services. Thank you. Michael with Lumity. Good morning. And then we have one of our programmatic grant managers, Shar. Good morning, Shar. And don't be surprised if I have to, open the floor to you or Edwin or during this meeting. There is some overlap, of course, with where things are placed on the budget. So good to have you on the call. Mark with Hire 360, we just spoke. Good morning. Jane with Chicago Women in Trades, thanks for joining. And Janice with Children First Fund? Yeah, that's it, CFF. Thank you for joining, Janice. All right. Well, thank you all for entering that in the chat. I will say, I throw this out every couple of meetings. It's always great. We love to introduce ourselves and build the community, but there's an ulterior motive as well to introducing ourselves. And in fact, a lot of what we are working on with this budget modification, not only do we need to do things properly for the sake of doing them properly, but all of this is potentially subject to audit, audit by the DCEO's internal audit team, or through an outside agency with the state of Illinois, all of which the Office of Illinois Works is not in control of, right? We don't get to determine which of our grantees get audited or when or how or what. And sometimes we get, audits that say, well, you have to prove to us everyone who was attending that workshop or that training. So it's very important that we document that, and certainly WebEx keeps track of it, but we like to also include it within the workshop itself so that everyone is properly accounted for. So let me go ahead and close that off. And I'm going to start by bringing up so this is an existing budget. Actually, I had this all properly set up, and then I played around with it just a little bit ago. But I think here is where let me take that off for a moment. There we go. So you can see this is kind of a prototypical grantee with a $550,000 budget award for 2025. And these were the approved expenditures for the 2025 program year. And the reason it's important to have this here is because this is the foundation for the modification. And let me just jump right to that. Looking at the modification worksheet, you'll notice that the instructions here and on the other worksheet we were looking at say, please type in the highlighted blue cells. So that's your indication that, you fill in your organization's name and your number. These should already be filled in for you because they're, we can, it's just standard. Your grant number will need to be filled in. But then under the current approved budget, these are highlighted in blue, which means that you need to go from your last approved budget, which is here again. So this $130,050 for personnel needs to be placed here in the current approved budget on personnel. Fringe, same thing. This $27,675 was taken from the previous approved budget. So this is pretty straightforward. It might be a change from how things were done before. Again, one of the standardizations of the modification template was the way this formula works. And this formula here that determines the new budget amount, you can see when I select into that field, it's saying that it's going to take D9 and add it to E9. So here's D9, and then the modification amount is E9, and that's how it's going to derive the new budget amount. So after you do this for the first time, it's essentially going to total up to your $550,000 in this example, right? The $550,000 budget. Does anyone have, and you'll notice there's a change with indirect costs that I'll come back to. Does anyone have any questions about that though? Very straightforward. Just enter your current approved budget into row D. Any questions there? Okay.
Well, Robin, this is Kara. I just sent Dan a chat because we are the only organization that had all of supplies that were lumped underneath the barrier reduction in our miscellaneous line item. And so I just wanted to make sure, do you want us just to keep it because that is technically our approved budget, or do you guys want us to correct that? And
nope, that's your approved budget.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Was approved for 2025. and I'll show you essentially how that gets placed, and I'll show you how that gets placed into this modification budget.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So the part I wanted to highlight down here is the indirect costs, because that's the one different formula from the rest. Remember, I kind of walked through how if we take this row right here, column F is adding column D and column E together. Well, the indirect is different. It actually is taking your indirect cost from last year and subtracting it from the modification amount, because it's going to derive an entirely new indirect cost for you based on both years, or if you're a 3-year grantee, based on the 3-year spend. So that might cause some confusion or questions, but when we get to the indirect costs, we'll kind of walk through it. If after that, there are still questions and they're not answered in this meeting, we can always pull one off if you have any questions before you send back your renewal budget. All right, so let's just jump into the overall workbook once we have this set up. The first thing, of course, is if you are utilizing indirect costs, then you would need to insert a text box, essentially, typically, or mark this off in some way where we can see that that you're utilizing, say, the 15% de minimis, or if you are using no indirect reimbursement, then mark that off as well. We skip section B, the certification page. Of course, what we ask is that you print this page as a PDF and then fill it out or sign, at least have the signatures done. You can fill this information out before you print it as a PDF, but then the signatures as wet signatures, and then scan that and send that back to me as a PDF that's separate from this Excel document. So you're gonna send the modification template back to us as an Excel document and the certification page as a signed PDF.
Hey, Dan,
Yes.
can you clarify what qualifies as a wet signature?
So for this renewal budget, obviously a wet signature is one that has been signed in ink, or a digitally secure signature.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right. So one of the first things to know about all of these categories, personnel, fringe, travel, equipment, supplies, etc., is that the only information you should be entering is through columns A through F, right? All of our templates have formulas that should not be manipulated. And if you try, you typically get a protected sheet warning. But sometimes people have found ways around that, or they use a different workbook entirely. It has to be submitted on this workbook, and all of the protections and formulas need to remain. So that's the first thing. What you can change are the number of rows that are displayed. So if we look here to the very left, you'll see it goes from row 6, 7, 8 to row 135. So all you need to do is highlight a row and then another row, and right click and say unhide, and then you have the full suite of rows to manipulate.
Answer that trick question, man.
Okay. So to get started, hopefully this is something that everyone can follow along with. If there are any challenges to this part, This is one part that we can either help you with on the side, or you can request information, or even request us to, can you manage this, and then show me how it's done. So what we need to do is copy over the previous budget's information for personnel without actually impacting this this new modification amount. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to put it all into one little cell right here. So I'm going to go back to the approved budget.
So, because you've probably been doing the same thing that we've been
And I think we
doing.
have someone on that's not on mute. If you could mute your line,
So,
appreciate it. So this is a pretend worksheet. You can see that I just listed everyone's name as to be required. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy this entire section. Now I can't copy cells and then insert them into a cell. It typically gives me an error message. So if I try to do that and go up in here into the formula line and enter that, it doesn't allow it. So instead, what I need to do is again, highlight all of this, copy it, and I'm going to open up a just a notepad and paste that as just pure text, and then recopy it, and then go back to the modification template, and I'm going to put this down as program year 2025. I'm going to hold down the Alt button and hit enter, and then paste that information back in. And now I have program year 2025's information. I'm actually going to come back in to this and identify that program year 2025 was in personnel was for $130,050. So that allows everyone that touches this grant going forward to understand what the current approved budget amount, where that was derived from. Okay, but it doesn't actually impact this year's budget. If I scroll all the way back down, because I opened those all up, you can see still see the state total is 0. Now I'm going to skip a couple of lines, skip 2 lines, and put program year 2026. And now I can enter my new information. For the sake of time, I'm going to just do an example here where I copy. Now I can't copy the column G. Remember, that has formulas, but I can copy these first 6 columns. And I'm going to pull that over, and if I needed to make changes to this budget, for this program year, I could. So now I have the program year 2026 information entered. Obviously, if I am changing names here, I can change names however I want to. And I'm going to then, it's important to skip a couple of rows. Now I'll show you why. I'm going to not skip a couple of rows at first. I'm going to rehide this information, or those rows. So this generates a flag for us because you can see row 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 are all filled out. I don't know if row 18 is filled out at this point. It might be, it might not. So it's important, as I mentioned, to skip a couple of rows so that we can see that you had finished your entries in the space allotted, and we don't have to unhide rows 20 through 133. And again, this holds true for personnel and all of the other categories that we're referring to. So now if I can see that the updated personnel costs for program year 2026 and 2026 alone are $146,450. If I go to section A, I can see that the 146,450 plus the previous approved amount is now gives me a new total of $276,500. Are there any questions with regard to how that was done?
Hi, Dan. This is Charlotte from EDDR Foundation. A couple of questions for you. So for the template, you want to see 2025 previously approved budget in the first tab, and then you want 2026. So then in the final total for F, are we combining then fiscal year 25 and 26 will be the total? So the modification would be fiscal year 2026 and the pre-approved would be 2025. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's just these templates do that for you. So the
Okay.
short answer is yes.
Okay.
But it does it all for you. Now,
Okay.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes.
Okay. And so the second question, can you go back quickly to that formula again to copy and paste? I got the copy, then the tab in the text. Can you repeat that?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I know. That's the kind of the kind of the goofy part about all of this. But let me do that on a different tab.
Okay.
Just to share an example of how that might look, because this is one tab I'll use to show what it might look like if there are some grantees that 2025 is not their first year on their grant. Obviously, you've been with us since 2022, but on this grant, it was just since 2025. But there are some grantees that are going to be in their third year of their cycle because they started in 2024, and so they need to go to again their previous approved budget, and I don't have a full example of that, but if this were their 2024 portion of their budget, they would copy all of that and move to a just a notepad. I think it might work with Word and just doing it as text and making sure it's all single spaced. But Notepad, doesn't add any formatting to it, so it makes it a little bit easier. And then you copy it again. So you paste it into that notepad, you copy it again, and then you come back to the workbook, the modification workbook. And if you need to add a space while maintaining in that row, you hold down Alt and hit Enter, and that provides spacing. But you paste it then into that row. And then you would do the same thing and copy the 2025 amount and go into the 2025 row. Again, provide yourself a space and paste that in. And so for those organizations that have a 2024, it would look like this, and then they would jump into their 2026 information.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So that talks a little bit about the formatting. And again, it's going to be the same for every, category except for indirect costs, which we will come back to at the end. But right now I'd like to walk through each of the categories to make sure that we are all on the same page with not only requirements, but also best practices. So first off, going to personnel, then in all of the categories, the narratives are very important. So we want to make sure that your narrative speaks to your budget, the line items. So essentially, we need to identify, each of these roles. And these roles, these first 7 roles, are all required roles. You can see it's in section 3 of the grantee manual. The current year 2025 grantee manual has a list of all of those roles. Your staffing plan, the Illinois Work Staffing Plan programmatic document, also has a list of all of those roles. You may have more roles than that. For example, we have included an executive director role here. But these 7 roles need to be accounted for, both on your line items and then in the narrative. Anything that's a line item has to be accounted for in the narrative. Now, there are times when maybe your instructor is contractual, so maybe that wouldn't be here. So you'd only have 6 of these roles, but we have to then see the 7th role in the contractual services. Or maybe you only have 2 roles here. We need to see 5 of them in the contractual services, right? The bottom line is we need to account on this budget for all of the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program roles. And what we're looking for here are our role titles. We completely understand that may not be, if this is, Dan Jones, that might not be data entry coordinator, might not be Dan Jones's title in your organization. But we're not really interested in the title in your organization. We're trying to identify and make sure that they comply with the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program roles. So if you must, you could put your role that your company uses, your organization uses as an appendant to our role, but it's really not necessary. And as it adds confusion. I don't know why I struggled with that, but if you need to, you can. Otherwise, I'd leave that blank. Again, I'm going to circle back to the periodic financial report. We copy this portion onto the periodic financial report, and we expect to see then these titles on the periodic financial report. So that's how we're identifying that it's an allowable expense, right? That right off the bat, before we even get to whether it's approvable, we need to know whether it's allowable. And it's only allowable if it's on your budget. So if you have data entry coordinator here on your budget, which again is required, but then in your reporting you put data czar, we might not match those 2 up, and we might say, well, this person's not on your budget. It obviously gets highlighted a little bit more distinctly when we look at other things, like for example supplies, right? We expect to see disposable PPE, for example, and your reporting, and then whatever that was, in-ear protection on your reporting, rather than just ear protection, then us having to figure out, well, was that construction lab supplies because they used it in the construction lab? Was that part of their durable PPE, disposable PPE? What was that, right? So your reporting should always start off with that. But we're going to have another workshop during orientation about that so that we can streamline that process. So again, the important thing is to have the 7 required, and then if you have additional, you obviously can have those. But once you have that, then we need to ensure that the narrative is properly accounted for. So let's see, what we want to do is you can take it from the previous year if it predominantly remains the same, but and I will also send out a copy of this example budget in its entirety, so you can see all of the narratives that we have supplied. So anyone on this call, we will make sure you receive that. And so here we have an example of the different narratives. Now these are actually fairly long. I'll send out an abbreviated version. This was the most commonly used one last year, though. So that's what I had for this workshop. But when I send it out, I'll actually send out the abbreviated version. But again, the idea is that hopefully in order, right? The first person listed up here was the program administrator. The second was the outreach and recruitment coordinator. So that's what we'd expect to see in the narrative. Program administrator, outreach recruitment coordinator, and so on. Hey, I'm throwing out these tips because for a couple reasons. One, we want consistency across the board, but two, we are going to be under a very tight window to have these budgets. Well, really, the whole modification executed, and so the more streamlined that all of the budgets are, the more that they adhere to a single format, the faster we will be able to process them. So it's really for everyone's benefit, since we are coming up to the end of the year. We'd like to, as many of the renewal grantees as possible that wind up working through negotiation and being approved for ultimately for the renewal. We want to be able to have the budgets or the agreements and modifications executed. All right, so that was personnel. Fringe. So the important thing to remember with Fringe, hopefully everyone received this message from last year, is that your Fringe is based off of the salary that you've reported here, right? So the program administrator is going to receive a salary for this grant. The portion of the grant is $19,250. So when we go to Fringe, that would be, oh, we haven't set this one up yet. That would be where I'll go to the example one. Let's go back to personnel. All right, so in this case, the program administrator had a personnel cost of $18,750. That means the fringe benefits starts with $18,750. And then their fringe is calculated off of that base. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay. So again, the personnel cost always becomes the base for the fringe. If you need to modify the rate for that individual, you can modify the rate for that individual, but the base is where we start. And then, a lot of narratives, fringe narratives, and let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see what I'm talking about. A lot of narratives, it's interesting. Again, the reason we're having this workshop, a lot of narratives are like half of the narratives are not descriptive enough. The other half are too descriptive and they limit you. And we don't want that actually. A lot of times when, and I'm not just talking about the fringe benefit one, but a lot of times when grantees write an overly specific narrative, it limits them then in what they can actually expense throughout the year. So we want to find that that fine line between providing a description that is sufficient for our purposes, for auditing purposes, for our accounting and accountability purposes, but it also does not limit you too much to actually pay your expenses throughout the year. So this is an example of a fairly specific one that still leaves you with a little bit of ability to, some organizations, for example, had, well, I'll use retirement contributions, right? They had pension contributions, but then they also opened up 401k contributions, but that wasn't listed on the budget because they specifically called out only pension contributions, right? So by just labeling it as retirement contributions, it provides them the flexibility if they are, offering both types for that organization. All right. Any questions about Fringe? So again, I'm going to send the budget out that we're looking, everyone that was attended this meeting, but that would be the narrative that we would recommend. Now, you're not required to use that one. And if you use your own, that's fine. We'll review it. If it's insufficient, we'll send it back. If it meets all of our needs, then we're good to go. All right. Travel. Now I want to highlight a different example here. Let me make this bigger. So here's one type of acceptable travel that we had seen in the past. Again, I'm looking at the original budget, not the modification budget right now. But the organization denoted mileage for travel to the Illinois Works training meetings. They denoted hotel and they denoted meals. And that's fine. You can then place that into the narrative and explain each one. I think I have, if I scroll down to the narrative here, staff mileage from grantee A training facility to the Illinois Works designated meeting locations, etc. Another way of doing that is to just list daily expenses. And I'm just going to put in a funny number there, but that way, based, and in the narrative, you would simply say based on your organization's, expense policies, you can determine the different costs, and it's more inclusive. I was having a conversation with Robin, and he said, what if one organization needed to take a taxi or public transportation, or one individual, I should say, for whatever reason, wound up needing to change things, right? This is very specific. This gives you a little bit more flexibility.
I think I would only add one thing, Dan, and that's it would cover whatever their policy is for their per diem or meal allowances. It might cover the cost of a hotel, and some entities have restrictions on what they can spend on a hotel room, like we have at the state. So make sure that that particular daily cost rate accommodates those things for the number of days that you need when you plan for your budget. If you're going to use that generic line item to cover some of those expenses and miscellaneous type of expenses. If you don't call them out up at the top, you need to have a place where you can post them in.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Which is really, what we're looking to share with you and give you those kind of best practices. So that's perfect. So in an example for, the modification, again, this rows 1 or 5 through 9, let's say that was part of the, your last year's budget, and then you go to the modification template. And travel, and we're going to enter it in here. Program year 2025 equals, I think it was $7,884. And then I'm going to place in, so that was last year's information. I'm going to expand this out, unhide, and then have a couple spaces, program year 2026. I'm going to change the format and utilize this daily expenses format instead. Now, you don't need to highlight anything or that it was a change in any way from one year to the next. This is going to be explained in the narrative this year. And we only need this narrative, right? We don't need last year's narrative to remain. I think that's probably something I should have highlighted previously. We're only looking at the narrative for this year. So that previous narrative where we walked through, you know, the mileage and the hotel cost and the meals per day, that all gets replaced with the narrative for the daily expenses, as Robin was just explaining. The other thing I want to highlight.
Dan, are you taking questions as we go on?
Sure, absolutely.
This is Robert Bigman from Bethel Family Resource Center. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to ask a question. The question I have is, the state provides, as you mentioned, guidelines for per diems. Should we be using those state guidelines?
So you should definitely be using those as a reference. If your organization has slightly different guidelines, you can use those. You might want to highlight to us if there's if your guidelines are a lot higher, you're going to need to flag that to us so that we can review that, right? So if your organization allows, you know, $500 a night hotels, we're going to need to have that discussion.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question. Oh, the other part I wanted to highlight here, and you know, this is obviously just based on timing and the ability to schedule things. Last year we had thought our orientation meeting, I think, was going to be in Rockford. We wound up changing it to Naperville, right? And then the annual conference, you know, got changed as well. So rather than trying to guess the locations, just put you know, to be determined by Illinois Works. And that again just allows the flexibility. Now we're not having to not that it required a budget mod previously, but we just don't want to be put in a situation where, you know, we're being asked, well, why did you allow this hotel bill in DeKalb when you know, the budget had said it would be in Naperville. So again, we're trying to introduce some flexibility for your organizations to make it easier on you. All right, so that was travel. Oh, it's also important to note, we're not just talking about travel to the Illinois Works required training and meetings. Some organizations, you know, you'll have your transition service coordinator that will travel to, you know, registered apprenticeship program meetings. I know in the Chicago area, there's the committee meeting that takes place every quarter. You know, they might just meet with contractors or, you know, go to other meetings so that they can increase the exposure of their program to registered apprenticeship programs, which is fantastic. Also, if you are arranging travel for your participants, say, you know, a bus trips to work sites, right? And you're going to do your narrative would need to explain this. You know, maybe you do 4 tours, 2 tours each cohort, so that's a total of 4, and then you do 2 on-site actual work days in each cohort, so it's a total of 8, for example. So you know, travel to those construction sites would be under travel here as well. And then again, the important part is including these 2 then, because these are the 2 modification amounts into the narrative. Closing this up once we're done with it, leaving some space so that we can identify that it's been completed. And if we go to section A, again, we'll now see that this 6250 is the modification amount. Right there. It's automatically adding the previous amount approved. So the new budget amount will be $14,134. So equipment. I'm going to go back to the, there it is. So as hopefully everyone knows, equipment is for, you know, items of value of over $10,000 or any computer equipment. So it's important to include that. It's important to remember that the grant funding owns the equipment, including computers, you know, durable hand tools, things like that. And we need to see those reused every year. This is an excellent example of how it highlights to whomever is reviewing the budget as we move equipment from the previous approved budget here and then on to the modification. So this will be for program year 2025. Oh, I forgot what it was already. Is that $7,000? I'll double check it. It's 5,000. It allows us to see right away what type of computer equipment were previously purchased. So we would not expect to see another 25 Chromebooks being purchased for the very next year, because obviously they weren't gifts. They weren't parting gifts to the participants. So can we see replacements, breakage? Of course, but not another set of 25, you know, Chromebooks. But any other equipment that you're adding for 2026 could be placed here, and maybe there's nothing. So now this tab is done. There wouldn't be anything in the narrative. And we would just see equipment, the previous $5,000 from last year, and then nothing this year. So the new budget amount remains at 5,000. So supplies, let's talk about supplies. Certainly we know that there's, you know, we want to have robust construction labs. That initially starts with the different, you know, tools that are needed in a construction lab. Similar to the computers, we wouldn't expect to see another $10,000 this year. Can you enhance what you had purchased last year? Of course, that's a great idea. Can you replace a couple of, you know, screwdrivers? Of course. The narrative that we identified, you know, does indicate that, you know, for example, let me make this bigger so we can all see it, that tools are expected to be inventoried and secured. You know, durable PPE is expected to be inventoried and secured. Right. So if we have an organization, you know, purchasing, you know, a bowling alley's worth of $250 boots, then you know, we need to make sure that those are inventoried and secured and reused properly, as opposed to disposable PPE, which can be assigned to each participant. Now, strictly speaking, the grant does not provide these types of things as gifts, right? So please don't put in there that they are given to the participants at the end of the cohort. We understand that disposable PPE is not inventoried. We're not asking how it's disposed of, but it cannot be written in here that it's intended to be given to the participants. We do expect to see consumable construction materials for that construction lab. Very often we have organizations that are sourcing that from other funds. So that's fine. We just need that to be included in the narrative then, that we don't expect to see it now in 2026. Any questions about supplies? And again, just to be as I think possibly the last time I'm going to do it, but to be very clear, every category would be copied, brought into a text format, and then added to the modification. Oh, this one was 2024. We already did that example. And placed there. And this actually 2025 was listed at $31,250.
And I have a question. This is Nadia from Chicago Women in Trades. For the prior years that you've referenced, 24 and 25, if our current budget that we submitted, the section A, only has 25 data in there, would we only provide you with the 25 paste? Would we only post the 25?
Yes. Yeah, this example here, to be very clear, this example here that shows a 24 and a 25 are only for those, I think, 6 grantees that operated under this grant agreement in 2024 and 2025, and now we're going to operate or requesting renewal for their third and final time in 2026.
Okay, understood.
Dan?
Yes.
Robin, since it's about 2 minutes till 11 and we've been going for an hour, I thought maybe we would look at the questions in the chat and then give maybe people just a couple minutes personal break. What do you think?
We can definitely do that. I didn't even realize there were questions.
So I'll read you a couple of the questions that are in the chat and then you can respond to them. This is from Jasmine Bankhead. If you're using indirect cost, does that come off the top of the 550,000 in the example that you utilized in your discussion of indirect?
We will get to indirect costs at the end.
The next one is this is from Mike Conley. We typically insert the signed PDF into the Excel spreadsheet. Is it required to send it as a separate sheet when we send our modifications in?
It is not. I actually don't know how to do that, and I've had other grantees ask me how to do that, and I don't know. So if you know how to insert a PDF into the Excel and still maintain the Excel format, that's fine. But what we sometimes wind up getting is that PDF signature page, the certification page, inserted into a PDF of the Excel workbook, which is not okay. We need the Excel workbook and we need the signature page. And if you can insert that in, that's fantastic.
Also from Mike Connolly, we are not charging the grant for salaries for some roles. Do we need to include them with a 0 salary? So I think he's referencing the required 7 positions that you were talking about, one of those versus something different that is supporting the program.
Yeah, so what you would do in that case, let's say, this is I'm just going to pretend this is your 2025 budget, but then in 2026, for whatever reason, these two are no longer going to be paid for by the grant, then we would ask just that you place them down here into the non-state funds. At this time, we do not require the financial information surrounding them. And then in the non-state narrative, just explain that those roles are being accounted for, in the same way that they would be up here, but they're being provided for by other funds. But at this time, we don't need the financial information.
Those were the only questions in the chat, Dan.
Okay. So let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. So by my count, that'll be, we'll say 11:07. How about that? All right, we'll see you all back here at 11:07.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. All right, well, welcome back, everyone. Let me zoom my screen. Okay. Actually, as long as I'm on the personnel tab, I do want to make note of one change that's going to be coming for 2026, and that is that the Office of Illinois Works is not going to be able to allow the transition service coordinator position to be split up among multiple people. Now, I don't know that the rules have been finalized on it. A lot of that has to do with the career services team and their interactions and how they're going to be working very closely with grantees to support your transitions. Obviously, that should be a very productive way for your organizations to get assistance in achieving those transitions and improving the performance reimbursement eligibility that each grantee has. But in doing so, we had some organizations in the past that essentially split the transition service coordinator role among, I don't know, 10 people. And so each had 10%. And so that creates a challenge when we're trying to coordinate things with the transition service coordinator and attend the transition service coordinator community of practice meetings, things like that. So that's one thing I should highlight. It doesn't, it shouldn't change the financials of a budget, right? A transition service coordinator at 100%, was fully accounted for in most budgets. So if you have any questions about that, you'll need to talk to your programmatic grant manager, but I just wanted to highlight that for people to take a look at as they walk through here. Let's see, we had just finished supplies, I believe. And again, I want to highlight this was just an example for those organizations that have 2024 on this grant. They're going to be potentially in their third year operating 2024, 2025, and 2026. Each of their categories should look like this, with having a 2024 line and a 2025 line, and then their 2026 will be here. But for most other organizations that just operated under this grant in 2025, they'll just have that single column, and then their 2026 modifications will appear here. Contractual services. So let's take a look at contractual services. So one of the things to understand about contractual services, we want to make sure that we're identifying sufficiently contractual services versus consultants, right? Consultants, and you can utilize the definitions up here and here, as well as consultants up here. Consultants are typically advising on how to do something. Contractual services are organizations or vendors that actually do something. That's not meant to be a slight to consultants, but it sounds like it the way it came out. Maybe it's just because my brother's a consultant. But so when an organization, a vendor, is providing the first aid CPR, they're doing so on as a as a contractor under contractual services. They're not performing a role as a consultant to advising you as to how to do your first aid CPR or your safety instruction. They're actually doing it. So these belong and are here properly under contractual services. That being said, and we'll see this in a moment when we get to indirect services or indirect costs, but contractual services are not part of indirect costs. Consultants, the fees can be. So actually, I'll just go ahead and fast forward so we can see it. There is a the indirect cost calculator. It's a little misleading because it refers to professional services when it's talking about consultants. It's not talking about contractual services. So it'd be easier if they just said consultants, but for whatever reason, it's listed as professional services there. So that's, again, consultants. So in this hypothetical example, there are no professional services that can be accounted because there aren't any here. The contractual services are not part of your indirect cost calculation. So just wanted to include that little PSA. Obviously, any contractual services or consultants, we will need signed contracts for each vendor. We don't need them right now. We will need them before your first, during the onboarding in January, essentially. So whenever you have those 2026 contracts, you can certainly send them over, but they're not required right now. I want to make that clear. But we probably will make a note in the narrative, as you can see in this one, that the grantee will submit signed contractors for each vendor, or signed contracts for each vendor. It should say contracts. All right. Any questions about the use of contractual services or consultants? Okay, perfect. Certainly our grant does not have construction, so we'll skip that. Occupancy, we do need to see occupancy. This kind of goes in a similar vein to, I think it was Mike's question about, well, what if we have personnel, but they're not part of the grant? That's fine, but we still need to see that your organization has the instruction facility specifically for the construction lab. So, so that might need to be placed down here if you're not charging the grant for it. But we would still need to see in the narrative this same information that, that you're providing the construction lab space. Maybe your construction lab and your classroom are all one, that's fine. And that if we need a letter either acknowledging that you are the landowner and that you are intending to use this for the purpose of construction training, or if you're renting it, we'll need a copy of that rental agreement and affirming that, a letter affirming that you have use of the property for a construction lab, and that they acknowledge that any damages are the responsibility of the grantee. So the landlord acknowledging that it's not the state of Illinois. This it explains up here as well. This should be placed in a typically in a square foot basis, right? That's the preferred method. If you are just, you're renting the facility and you're renting it on a monthly basis, that's fine. We do want to see down here this the size of the facility. So please, include that in the narrative. But once you include that in the narrative, then the effect is the same, right? You can place it into square footage up here. All right, moving on. The grant doesn't have R&D, so we can skip that. Telecommunications. Some grants utilize this, some don't. We do need to see a narrative explaining, what it's used for. Sometimes it's a portion of the telecommunication expense. That's fine. Just be clear on as to what the line items, how they're being derived. Training and education. I think most of you are aware that this is only for your employee education and training. This is staff development. It is not for the training of the participants, right? That's either your personnel, your contractual services. Sometimes there might be some things in miscellaneous, but for staff themselves, that goes here. If the staff are traveling for training, that would go under travel, right? This would be just for the costs of the workshops or the conferences. And you can see that here in the narrative. Direct administrative, this hypothetical grant does not have any, certainly could, but it just needs to follow all the other performances, where we need a full narrative explaining how the cost is derived and why it's necessary. And then miscellaneous. So this is where we'd expect to see the most. Again, ensuring that you unhide any columns as necessary, depending on the size of your grant. Barrier reduction funds. We standardized this last year. We want to make sure that grantees are utilizing, let's go back. Let me make this larger. We want to make sure grantees are using a standard verbiage here that provides you with flexibility. So the barrier reduction fund is to provide the wraparound services, student support services, and transition services as required. There's no need to call out specifically that you will use this for, CTA bus passes, because then when you need to purchase a MetroCard for somebody, you have specifically said you're not using it for that, right? So the grantee manual provides a list of acceptable expenses and allowable expenses. That's really what you can go off for any of these wraparound services, student support services, transition services. And the grantee manual also provides the ability for you to go to your programmatic grant manager for approval of costs that are not specifically allowable under wraparound services or student support services or transition services. So this covers them all. And then the second line here is that it's budgeted at an average of $600, right? Because we want grantees to be able to provide support where it's needed for their participants. One participant might not need any barrier reduction assistance. The stipend is all they need, and they can move forward. Another grantee might come across a $1,000 expense that we can approve. And so we're really just using this as an average to move forward with a general barrier reduction fund allotment. Stipends. I get this question every year, and it essentially is that we didn't use all of our stipend from last year. can we just make this 30 this year because we have leftover from last year? And the answer is no. The stipends and the barrier reduction funds, in particular, these two, they need to be fully funded for your grant participants for that year. So this grant, again, has a hypothetical 50 people. So we're seeing, 50 stipends at the full amount. Again, another question we get is, well, we know that most people wind up missing, 5 to 10 hours. Can we just put that at 190, even though our curriculum calls out 200 hours? Again, unfortunately, the answer is no. The stipends need to be presented as fully funded in the budget. So again, we also want to utilize this type of verbiage down here, stating that the stipends are based on instructional hours per an approved stipend policy, and how we determine that amount, and that the stipends are also performance based, right? It's not just based on the instructional hours. The stipend policy is performance based. Then the rest of these, these are just hypothetical examples. Some grantees have this. The program marketing, every organization is required to submit a marketing plan. This should align with that, right? We can't see a marketing plan that has $1,000 of expense and a request for $5,000 on the budget. Conversely, we can't see a marketing plan that has $10,000 of planned expenses, but you're only accounting for 5,000, right? That makes it so that one of them is going to be wrong. So this should match your marketing plan. Even if it's not fully established yet, if you have to set this, and then that's going to determine your marketing plan, right? Your marketing plan could wind up utilizing, let's pretend this was how it was set up, 2,500 per cohort. Your marketing plan, you wind up using an additional $1,000 per cohort through some other funds that you can then put on your marketing plan to explain how that's why that doesn't match the budget. Because we know some of those marketing plans won't be finalized until maybe January. Then this one here. So one of the requirements for 2026 will be that organizations, and none of this has been finalized yet, you'll receive this in the 2026 grantee manual, but that organizations will host a job fair for their current participants and graduates. And the career services team is going to be working with organizations to assist with that and ensure that their alumni, their graduates, are in contact and transitioning. So if you're going to have expenses related to that, you'll want to include them in the budget this year. You may not. You may already hold job fairs. Most organizations that we've talked to say, yeah, that's not going to be a problem. We already run 2 a year. So if that's the case, just note that down here, that you have, that your organization runs 2 job fairs at no cost to this grant, and then, include that in the narrative here so that we can see that. Okay. I think I saw a question pop up in the chat. I don't have my chat open though. Let's see. There it is. Now it's open. Can we allocate a percentage of stipend funds under the non-state category to show that it is fully funded? I will have to get back to you. So the question is, I was explaining how the stipends are required to be fully funded. And so the question is, can we allocate a percentage of stipend funds under non-state category? I will have to get back to you all on that. It's a good question. All right, any other questions before I move on to indirect costs? Okay. So, the indirect cost calculator, I'm going to show first the 2025. So this is an already approved grant, right? This is your historical document that you're working off of. So indirect costs should be based off of the indirect cost calculator or the rules that the indirect cost calculator runs through. So in this case, we have salaries and wages, right? That comes from that personnel tab. You can actually just point to the personnel tab, and you can see here in the formula line that when I select this cell, it points to personnel G136. So if we move back to personnel, that is G136 right here. So it's getting the correct amount that you can contribute to your indirect cost calculation. Now, you don't have to point it. You can just manually type it in, although I have seen people make typos there. Or if you wind up changing something on personnel and decreasing your personnel for whatever reason, now this is wrong and it's too much, right? So I recommend just pointing to it. But again, this was for 2025 because it's going to change on the modification one. So just make sure you understand we're looking at the 2025 one. So in the similar vein, fringe benefits are pointing to that category tab. Professional services, again, that is not contractual services, that's the consultant. I think it's pointing here to G134, but G134 is 0. Yep, it's pointing to G134, so that's 0. And then it's pointing to travel, and it's pointing to materials and supplies. And it winds up with a basis of $199,109. If we go to the indirect cost tab, we can actually then point to that basis, right? We can point back to this calculator and see that it's at 199. Now, this organization elected to utilize the 15% de minimis, but, and I don't know if I've manipulated this at all during our conversation, but remember, we started out, yeah, I did. I obviously played around with things. We started out with 550,000, right? And it needs to be that to the penny. And so when they were doing this back in, 2024 for their 2025 budget, they recognized that they could reduce their indirect cost rate so that the indirect cost amount will cause the overall budget to be $550,000 to the penny. So that's what we see here. So that's why it's that's kind of the example that this works through for indirect cost. Now for the modification, it no longer works exactly that way. The modification will look at this indirect cost calculator. Instead of pointing to the single category of personnel, it's now going to point to section A, cell F9, which is here. So now it's taking the personnel for both years or all 3 years, depending on what type of grantee you are. And it's saying this is the personnel expense that I can set my basis for indirect costs off of. So it's going to use the new budget amount to redetermine an indirect cost calculation.
So question of clarity, is it going to use the personnel and fringe benefits amount or just the personnel amount?
Each line is its own. So here it's using personnel. Here it's using fringe. And again, it's using fringe in the same manner that it uses personnel. It's selecting the entire budget amount. So if you utilized fringe in 2025, but for whatever reason, your organization is not paying fringe through the grant in 2026, it's still capturing the 2025 amount for your indirect costs. So again, it's the change here is that instead of looking at each year and creating a 2025 indirect cost and a 2026 indirect cost, it's simply saying, okay, what is your new budget amount, which includes 2025 and 2026, and it's creating a new indirect basis off of that. So it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So going back to this calculator, again, it's pointing to the new total amount, which is 2024, 2025, and 2026, or 25 and 26. It's pointing to the new budget amount to determine the basis. And then you would then, point your basis there. And your indirect cost rate might be 15% this year, instead of utilizing the 14.708 that we used in 2025. But again, this indirect cost will now be for the entire grant. So 25 and 26, because it's using a basis of 2025 and 2026. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Dan, I'm still confused if we use two different rates for the 2 different years. So 25 has a different rate versus 26.
You won't be using 2 different rates anymore. There's only going to be one rate. It's essentially modifying your 2024 or 2025 rate and getting rid of it and saying, okay, well, let's add 2025 and 2026 together. Now, what rate do you want to use?
Okay, so we look at the new budget amount that we need and back into the rate.
Yes.
Okay.
Most likely, in a case of a grantee, that, let me see here. Let's see, in the example of if we look here, right, this is the 2025 previously approved budget. So this grant had a $199,109 base. Most likely for 2020, on the 2026 budget, the base will have increased to somewhere around, let's just say 405,000. So instead of having so this is 60,000, remember. So instead of having an indirect cost of 28,000 and an indirect cost of 31,000, you now have an indirect cost of 60,000. It kept track of it. It's just calculating it differently. That's why I said it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Remember, so this is the modification budget, and it did away with the 17 or 14.7% rate, and it is now utilizing essentially a 15% rate on each of these, because that's what we've said now we want to exercise. If for some reason that does not work for your organization, you know, and you say, no, I really needed 14.0% or 14.7% for one and 15% for the other, you know, we can work through those details and see why that's necessary. And we might be able to manage a workaround on that. But in most cases, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, so it won't matter.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just know, sorry, in our case, we would love to use the 15%, but then we would be over what we're given as far as the new 26 budget.
So, so if you wind up moving it back down, it has the same effect as it had the previous year. So now the previous year is closer to 28.94. And if we go back to that previous year budget, it was 29. So it's within $400. And we can get closer if I would use a more exact, you know, calculation. If I use this whole thing, it's actually going to give you the same result. So if you're consistent and you want to use the same amount, it's going to give you the same result now. Section A. Oh, that didn't update that way. But we can wind up giving you the same previous amount if for some reason you need that, but your overall budget shouldn't be impacted by this. But Nadia, let's talk offline. If after you make all the other changes, your indirect is not coming out correctly, we can work one off on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Any other questions? All right, so I'll send out the example with the example narratives for everyone to take a look at. I'll try to get an answer on the, can you move stipend funds to non-state before I do that, so that I can include that answer with that email. But other than that, I appreciate everyone's time today. Any last questions before we shut it all down?
Hey, Dan, this is Carrie. I do have a quick question. If we go through the budget after you send this and there were some additional questions, can we reach out to you, or should we include Robin on that as well?
Yeah, when I send this out, I'll include Robin and you can reply back to both of us.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is it a requirement for the 1425 stipends, or is that just a maximum amount?
Oh, that was just an example. I was just using a hypothetical.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we currently don't have, to my knowledge, a posted minimum, but you know, it will trigger a programmatic discussion if we feel that the stipends are too low to meet the intended purpose, of course.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. Hope you have a great week, and talk to you soon.
It's great to meet everybody. Thank you for participating today.
Thank you.